So prevention in a very large part is predicated on our ability to understand and modify risk and protective factors for mental and substance use problems. As the world changes, our approach to prevention must be nimble and innovative. This morning we focused on new data and shifting trends that challenge our understanding of these issues. We also heard from members of the Premise Youth Advisory Board about what matters most to them and to their communities, where they see the priorities for research and what principles they would like to see guide prevention, research and implementation. There are gaps in our knowledge and there are challenges that call for new ways of thinking and doing and new questions to ask. We're being challenged to embrace complexity, I think, and to bring fields of knowledge and expertise together in new and exciting ways. We want to use this session to hear from you about where those gaps are and where you see the opportunities for prevention and where we should focus our research and implementation efforts. The Summit briefing paper outlined a strong case for prevention of anxiety, depression and substance use disorders. And some of you would have had the opportunity to read and to have a look at it. We know that about 75% of adult mental disorders emerge by the time people are 25 years of age, around half before they leave school. And over their lifetime, 1 in 2 people will experience mental ill health. We also know that mental and substance use disorders have considerable impact on people, families and communities, and it's estimated they cost Australia over $43 billion each year. Okay, so we do know that prevention can be effective. Prevention programs and interventions for anxiety, depression and substance use disorders do exist, and their efficacy and in some cases cost effectiveness has been demonstrated in scientific trials. And such programs and interventions have the potential to prevent or delay the onset, halt the development or escalation, and reduce the impact of mental and substance use problems. But there are important gaps in our knowledge, and we've been hearing a little bit this morning about where some of those gaps might be. But we also know that whilst there's a lot of research that's been conducted within school settings, high school and in primary school, there are also opportunities for prevention across the life course, in early childhood, in the perinatal period, and then through to TAFEs, tertiary education settings and workplaces, and in the community more broadly. So we do need to think bigger and broader. We also have fairly limited information about the effectiveness of programs over the long term, and that's quite an important gap in our knowledge. We also have few programs for rural and remote programs, and few programs that are culturally appropriate and safe for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, programs that are inclusive of or targeted for LGBTQI+ young people. And we have relatively few integrated prevention models. So this applies to whether we're thinking about integration in terms of integration across fields or areas, mental health and substance use, physical health, sleep, diet, screen time, or programs that target both parents and children, or programs that might combine targeted and universal approaches to prevention. What I do want to say is that in almost all of these areas, Australian researchers are leading the way in terms of filling some of these gaps. And we have studies at the moment ongoing that are filling almost all of these gaps, or starting to fill these gaps. So yes, it's absolutely critical that we focus on improving our evidence and continuing to build our evidence base in new and exciting ways. But we also need to think about how we embed that new knowledge into practice and how we implement effective programs and be ready to bring them to scale. Now, there's also a really important policy context in mental health. Australia and its states and territories have a strong history of policy reform and reviews and inquiries related to mental health. And Australia remains the only country with a specific mental health response to the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment. But this history and the current context is important because it tells us that mental health reform is very firmly on the agenda. But there are some gaps there. While many of these highlight the need for more prevention and early intervention efforts, most continue to focus on mental health services and treatment, and mental health prevention within mental health per se is not always on the national agenda in terms of health. So we believe that we need a stronger focus on primary and secondary prevention in mental health, and that Australia needs a strategically integrated set of priorities for prevention research and implementation for mental and substance use problems. And we do believe that now is an opportune and an important time to have this conversation. So this conversation that we're having over this 2.5 days and this session today, we hope will lay the foundations for some of these priorities.